Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by welcoming you guys. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. Today is the fourth day of our 5-day course, and what we're going to be doing is starting with meditation like we do each morning. We'll start with the chanting, then I'll give you some guidance on the meditation. There'll be that period of time where it's just quiet, and then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. Then after that, I'm going to share this topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me. This is the natural law that the Buddha is helping you to awaken to or cultivate wisdom about. I'm going to teach you 4 different types of Kamma, and I'm going to teach you how to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. Then after our mid-morning break, I'm going to share with you what is merit and how to receive continued support on the path to enlightenment. Then we're going to have our lunch break, and when we come back, I'm going to be sharing activity with you guys that we can do in the afternoon, and then I'll also be teaching you how to integrate what it is that we've been learning over this course into your day-to-day life. And then we'll talk about the field trip tomorrow and all that kind of stuff as well. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you're welcome to. Remember, the chants are over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself to the chanting sheet, and then you're welcome to join in the chanting as well. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Otang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Sawakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning. Welcome to you guys. Nice to see you guys all here. Welcome to everyone online as well. I'm going to help you guys to understand this topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me. All throughout the course, I've actually been teaching you about this natural law, but now we're going to go in and talk about it specifically. Everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, what we're talking about is cultivating wisdom about the natural laws of existence, that in the unenlightened state, the mind lacks wisdom of how the world truly functions. It's kind of like when we were a child, we didn't understand the natural law of gravity, so we struggled and we had difficulties. We fell down. We made unwise decisions. We hurt our elbows or hit our head or broke our toys. We fell down and cried and cried and cried because we lived in a world that we didn't understand. But then slowly but surely, we might say that we awoke to the natural law of gravity, meaning we cultivated wisdom about it. And now that we have this wisdom, we make wiser decisions and we navigate the world more peacefully, that we don't struggle and have those difficulties anymore. This is why we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world because we've awoken to this natural law of gravity. We no longer struggle with it. We understand the world that we live in. Well, there's other natural laws that are affecting us, whether we're aware of these natural laws or not. Just like the natural law of gravity, we weren't aware of it when we were a child, but it was affecting us. The same thing is true about this natural law of Kamma, that it's affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. So the more wisdom that you have about it, now you can actually navigate the world peacefully and joyfully because you're no longer struggling and having difficulties. When you're experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, all the stress and anxiety and all these other feelings, this is the mind struggling to live in a world that it doesn't understand. That's the mind lacking wisdom. As we talked yesterday about craving, anger, and ignorance, or the three unwholesome roots or the three fires, this is the mind struggling with a lack of wisdom. So what you're doing on the path is you're not believing in anything. You would never be interested in believing in the natural law of Kamma, but instead you need to be able to see the truth for yourself. So by going in and peering into it and learning about these 4 types of Kamma, you'll be able to independently verify that this is true. So what I'm going to do is share with you some teachings here to help you. But as you guys know, you guys are welcome to ask questions. We have the microphones here for you guys. And for anybody who's online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. So first, let's just talk kind of generally about this natural law before we go in and talk about it more specifically. It's a natural law that is functioning at all times, and everyone is being affected by it, whether they're aware of this natural law or not. What this means is cause and effect, or action and result. I use this word Kamma because it doesn't translate to just one English word. If it did, I would just use that English word because it'd be easier for everyone. Some people call this karma. You might have heard that. That's the Sanskrit version. That's a different language, where the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So the word Kamma is being used in his original teachings. So that's why I still use the word Kamma, because it doesn't translate to one English word, and it's from the original teachings of the Buddha. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. There's no being who's overseeing this natural law to determine what does or doesn't happen. It's not punishments and rewards. Essentially, it's a sequence of events that whenever you make decisions, either wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience certain results. And this is your Kamma. So when you make decisions wisely, you'll experience wholesome Kamma, or wholesome results. And when you make decisions unwisely, you're going to experience unwholesome Kamma, or unwholesome results. Oftentimes when certain things are happening in our life, we might think that it's good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate, or sometimes people think it's God or some entity called the universe that's controlling what you experience. Or sometimes when you experience things, people typically blame this on other people. But this isn't actually true. You need to be able to see true reality, that anything that you're experiencing is a result of decisions you're making. And now, if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's going on in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. Whereas if it's good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate or God or some entity called the universe, or if it's other people that are determining what you experience, then you're stuck. You're locked in. You can't actually change anything about your life. So this isn't actually true. You can change anything and everything that's going on in your life. So for example, if I was walking down the beach and the wind was blowing in my face and I was kicking up the sand, and the wind and the sand was blowing, or the wind was blowing the sand back in my face, if I thought this was good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate, or if I thought this was God or some entity called the universe, or if I thought this was other people that was causing me to experience this, I would just keep walking down the beach and kicking up sand. I would never cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and experience different results. So the power in understanding the natural law of Kamma is that you can change anything about what's going on in your life. You can just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and experience different results. So everybody is being affected by this natural law, whether you're aware of it or not. And this natural law is happening based on your intentions, your speech, and your actions as you are making certain decisions about those things. As I shared, it's not a system of punishments and rewards. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not even about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's a sequence of events that is occurring. So when you're first starting to learn this natural law, it's helpful to learn these teachings from the Buddha. Now, in this book series of 13 books, there's one book that's dedicated to the natural law of Kamma. It's a consolidated version of the teachings of the Buddha on the natural law of Kamma. But we could really say the entire book series is about the natural law of Kamma, because everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to that. But these are two specific teachings that you need to understand at this point as you're starting to approach this to be able to understand it. So the Buddha is saying here that beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying here is that you are the one who creates your Kamma. Nobody else can create Kamma for you. Sometimes people joke around. They're like, oh, don't rub your bad Kamma off on me, or I'm going to give you some of my good Kamma. This isn't actually possible. It's your decisions that are leading to any particular result that you experience. And now, based on those decisions, you're going to experience either wholesome or unwholesome Kamma. Then he says, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold, to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. Now, I realize some of you guys haven't independently verified the cycle of rebirth because you're just starting out. It's not something you do when you just get started, but that's also something you never believe in. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs and then hoping something good happens when you die. It's about learning, growing, developing now in this life to experience an ideal life now. But there is this cycle of rebirth that he teaches that can be independently verified, but I typically teach people to set that aside when they first get started. But just understand that that is something you can independently verify, and there is this continuous cycle of rebirth. And what the Buddha is sharing here with you is that you can't run and hide from your karma. Any karma that you produce, you're going to experience it either in this life, the next life, or some life after that. That's what he means by some subsequent occasion. So just as a little bit of a summary here is it's the natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. It's your life, your decisions, and your results. So when you come to understand that it's you that's creating your own karma and you can't run and hide from your karma, then the next question is, well, let me learn as much as I can about this natural law so that now I can make wiser and wiser decisions and experience more and more wholesome results. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome karma. You've extinguished all your unwholesome karma. You're not experiencing anything unwholesome coming back to you. So I'm going to teach you these 4 types of karma. There's wholesome karma and unwholesome karma. There's old karma and new karma. What wholesome karma is any decisions that you're making that are harmless. When you're making harmless decisions, you will experience wholesome karma. When you're making harmful decisions, you're going to experience unwholesome karma. Now, you guys learned from the Four Noble Truths that you can't cause other people to be discontent. Your anger, your sadness, your frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of that is being caused by your own mind. It's not other people that are causing you to experience these feelings. That's what the mind thinks in the unenlightened state because of its lack of wisdom. But you guys were walked through the Four Noble Truths in a way that you can independently verify that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. So you can't cause other people to experience feelings just like they can't cause you to experience any particular feelings. Nobody can insert a feeling into your mind, but you can cause people harm. When you cause people harm, this would be causing harm to their physical body, to their material possessions, or their reputation. And whenever you cause harm to a living being, they're more than likely going to be interested in causing harm back to you. That's the natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect, right? That whenever you put out harm, harm is going to come back to you. So you're not interested in causing harm to other beings because it's just going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results for you. So here's an example for you. Right now, you're just sitting here listening to someone speak. That's all you're doing. You're just sitting in a certain spot. You're just sitting there, just listening to someone speak. You're not causing any harm to anybody. That's why there's no harm that's coming to you right now. But if you were to take your finger and start poking the person's eyes that's sitting next to you, you're going to experience some harm, right? They're probably going to slap your hand away, or they're going to get up and walk away, or something's going to happen, right? It's not going to be the way it is right now where you're just sitting there and nothing's happening. So when you start causing harm, when you're making harmful decisions, where you're causing harm to someone's physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation, now harm is going to end up coming back to you. So this is wholesome karma and unwholesome karma. Then there's old karma and new karma. What old karma is any decisions that you've made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now in the present moment. And then any decisions you're making now in the present moment, that's going to produce new karma that you're going to experience in the future. So for example, let's just say in the present moment, I'm receiving a letter from the government. And this letter says, hey, we found an error on your tax form from 3 years ago, and you owe us $3,000. You owe us $1,000 for the initial amount. You owe us $1,000 penalty and $1,000 interest. This is my old unwholesome karma. Let's just say I lied on my tax forms 3 years ago when I was reporting my income to the government. This is my old unwholesome karma. Well, now in the present moment, I have some decisions to make of how to handle this. And whatever I decide in the present moment, this is going to produce new karma that I'm going to need to deal with in the future. So if I didn't know these teachings and I didn't understand the teachings of the Buddha, then maybe what I might do is rip up that letter and throw it away. I might try to run and hide from this, right? I just rip it up and throw it away. Well, in the present moment, I'm creating new unwholesome karma. Or let's just say that in the present moment, I call up the government or write them a letter and I'm bitter and harsh and hostile with them. I'm vindictive and resentful. I start hollering and yelling at them. Well, in the present moment, I'm creating new unwholesome karma, right? But if I understand these teachings and I understand that this is a decision that I made 3 years ago, whether I lied or made a mistake, whatever it was, there's a decision here that I made that produced this result. Well, now I'm looking to extinguish this old unwholesome karma. I need to extinguish it, like bury it in the sand. So the way that I'm going to do that is I might call up the government or I might write them a letter, being very friendly, very polite, very cordial, saying, hey, I apologize. This was an oversight on my part. I take full responsibility for it, but I'm so sorry. I don't have $3,000. I can't pay that amount of money, perhaps, right? And now I'm being so polite and kind and friendly, respectful to them. They say, hey, you know what? We're going to drop off the interest. We're going to drop off the penalty. How about you just pay us $1,000? And now I say, oh, that's so appreciative. I really appreciate that you're doing that. I'm very thankful, but I don't even have $1,000. I'm so sorry. Right. And then now that I'm being polite and respectful to them, they might say, how about if we work out a payment plan and maybe you pay us a certain amount over the next several months? Would that work out for you? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. That'd be great. So now I'm extinguishing my old unwholesome karma by producing new wholesome karma. By being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful and working on a solution here, I've produced new wholesome karma now that I'm now extinguishing this. Right? So this is old karma and new karma. Old karma is any decisions you made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now in the present moment. And then any decisions you're making now in the present moment is going to produce new karma. And it's either going to be wholesome or unwholesome. So if you could snap your fingers today, just snap your fingers and instantly practice the teachings of the Buddha, which you can't, but let's just say you could, you're still going to experience old unwholesome karma. Because you've made unwise decisions in the past, and that's all going to come back to you. You need to experience that. Because like the Buddha said back here, is you can't run and hide from your karma. Anything you've decided in the past that was unwise, you're going to experience the results of that. So we're going to talk about how to extinguish that. But first, let's talk more about how this wholesome and unwholesome karma is generated, because it's connected to something that I taught yesterday. I taught you guys the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. And we also talked about the 3 wholesome roots too. We talked about craving, anger, and ignorance. And some of you guys weren't here yesterday, so I'll just kind of give you guys a little recap on this because this is what's producing the unwholesome karma. That whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. What craving is your mind's selfish desires, where you're longing, yearning, you're chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting things to be permanent, thinking that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. It's like an unquenchable thirst that the mind has. So it chases and chases and chases and chases and chases. So whenever you're making decisions through your own selfish desires, your cravings, your longing, your yearning, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. Because if you get what you want, you're going to get happy and excited about that. But if you don't get what you want, you're going to get angry or sad or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. And when that anger is arising, the mind in the unenlightened state firmly believes it's being caused by something external. And this is where an individual will typically push people away or push the situation away. You might have pushed away friends or family in your life, or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. Or you might start putting your expectations on people and trying to pressure them into doing things your way. And as long as you're making decisions through your anger and your hostility, your bitterness, it's producing unwholesome karma for you. You can independently verify these things that I'm sharing with you, because you can look at situations where you've been that way and you can see you maybe had a broken relationship, or you lost your job, or some other unwholesome result occurred for you as a result of you functioning through this anger, hatred, and ill will. And then where all of this is coming from is it's coming from what's referred to as this ignorance. I don't tend to use this word. This is the way that people translate the words of the Buddha. A better way to think about this is the unknowing of true reality, or lack of wisdom, or misunderstanding, confusion, misperception, because the Buddha wouldn't have talked about people in a degrading, negative, and diminishing way. The enlightened being doesn't speak that way, but oftentimes people are translating into this word ignorance. A better way to think about it is the unknowing of true reality, that the mind in the unenlightened state just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It lacks wisdom of things like the natural law of Kamma. And whenever you're making unwise decisions, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma. So while we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, or this unknowing of true reality, it's really because of the ignorance that craving and anger continues in the mind. If the mind had wisdom, it would see the true reality that the cravings are what's producing the discontent feelings. This anger is arising from within your own mind, and now you would actually solve that. But because the mind lacks wisdom, it continues to stay stuck in this cycle of experiencing craving and anger over and over and over and over again. So whenever you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's producing unwholesome Kamma, unwholesome results. That's why we refer to these as the 3 unwholesome roots. But then there's wholesome roots too. These generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, these are the exact opposites, because craving is where you're having these selfish desires. It's kind of like mine. You're looking out for yourself, where generosity is just the opposite. You're giving and sharing with the people around you without any expectation of anything in return. That's going to produce wholesome Kamma for you. And then there's loving kindness, which is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill towards others. This is the exact opposite of anger and hostility, the bitterness, the ill will towards others, the frustration or agitation or annoyance. Then there's this wisdom, which is the exact opposite of the unknowing of true reality. When you make decisions based in the natural laws, now you're going to experience wholesome Kamma, right? So this is how you produce wholesome Kamma. So what you're doing on this path, through the Eightfold Path and all the techniques that the Buddha is teaching you, like meditation and others, is you're gradually bringing down the craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, and then you're gradually increasing the generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And more you're making decisions through that. And as you make decisions like that for an extended period of time, more and more you're going to be producing wholesome Kamma. I'm going to teach you how to specifically eliminate your unwholesome Kamma to be able to experience only wholesome Kamma. But before I do, let me see what questions you guys have on the 4 types of Kamma: wholesome Kamma, unwholesome Kamma, old Kamma, and new Kamma. Do you guys have any questions you would like to ask? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, David. I just find myself spend lots of time every day thinking about whether this is a right decision for me to make. It's kind of mental struggling, and it could be as small as like, should I eat this or not? Whether I should go for this trip or not? Whether I should go to this social event or not? And after that, I also spend time on regretting the decision I've made. I would tell myself like, okay, you see, this is a like unwholesome Kamma from the decision you have made. So it's kind of mental struggling. You have suggestions for that?
Yeah, this is actually normal. It's part of the process of getting to enlightenment. The Buddha calls it thinking and pondering. That in the past, before you knew the teachings of the Buddha, I don't know about you, but I was just like plowing through the world, not really thinking about things, and just thought I knew what I was doing and making whatever decisions I was making, and then experiencing whatever consequences I was experiencing. But once you learn these teachings and you start realizing, oh, there's this better way of life, there's these natural laws, I need to pay attention to this stuff. Now, whenever you're confronted with a certain situation, you tend to think and ponder about the teachings of the Buddha and what would be the wise way to make this decision. Then you start making your decisions and you start reflecting on those and you start learning from those. That's part of how you gain wisdom of this natural law, is you see it for yourself. And you see in situations where you made a decision and you thought it was the best decision, and then it kind of blows up on you and you look back at it and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I did have craving, anger, and ignorance when I was making that decision. I should have made it like this, or I should have done this. So this is part of the process of cultivating your wisdom. But don't only look at the unwholesome things that you're experiencing, look at the wholesome things too, because that'll show you that in some situations you are making wise decisions, and it'll further help you to be able to verify this natural law, that you can see that when you're practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, it's producing wholesome karma for you. So that's part of the process. Your mind will do that for multiple years, where you'll look at a certain situation, and it'll take you a lot of time to make a decision because you don't quite have the wisdom of this natural law yet. But that's part of the process to cultivate that wisdom. And now when you have more wisdom, over time, you'll be able to make decisions easier and easier because you've cultivated that wisdom. It's part of the process. It's almost like a treasure chest that you're building, right? A treasure chest of wisdom.
Like this right here kind of implies that there is no middle state. There's no, like, you're not craving and you're not generous. That's not possible, it sounds like. Like it sounds like it's kind of obvious that if you're not generous, then you're kind of selfish. You're kind of craving a little bit. So it's holding you back from being generous. So I can understand that. And same thing with wisdom and ignorance. But I'm having more trouble with the anger thing or loving kindness because I can be not angry, but I cannot feel loving either. So but I don't know if that's just the kind of that I'm not loving enough or something.
Yeah. You can also make decisions that aren't based in craving, and they're not based in generosity either. So like, let's just say, like at work, I don't know what you do for work, but let's just say you're working a job, right? And now you're doing a certain task, and you're doing that task and you're doing it really well. And you know that you're doing this in order to acquire resources for yourself, like money, so that you can purchase food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. And you're doing that wisely. You're making decisions in order to do that. You're using your wisdom, right? So you're making decisions based in wisdom, but you're not necessarily practicing craving, and you're not necessarily practicing generosity in that situation, but you are practicing wisdom because it's wise to go to work. It's wise to apply yourself and show initiative and things like this. So you can make decisions where not all three of these are involved, but just one of them are involved. And now it's producing wholesome karma for you, like the example of work. Okay. So I don't see any questions anywhere else. So now let me help you guys to understand how to extinguish all your unwholesome karma. Okay. So as I shared, if you snap your fingers today and you could instantly practice the teachings of the Buddha perfectly, which you can do, you're still going to be experiencing unwholesome karma coming back to you. The way that I think about it is if you had a garden hose, and all throughout our life, we've been shoving mud into our garden hose, not realizing that's what we're doing because of our ignorance, our unknowing of true reality, we've been putting mud into this garden hose. And now when you start learning these teachings, it's like, I'm not interested in putting mud into my garden hose anymore. I'm going to take my garden hose, I'm going to hook it up to the faucet, and I'm going to start putting some clean water into this garden hose. That's what it means to be able to train your mind. You're now purifying your mind. You're training your mind. So if you open up that faucet and you've got like a little drip coming through, that's like if you're coming to the temple maybe once every 6 months, you're meditating once a month, you're reading a book once a year. Okay, you've got a little drip going through this impacted garden hose. You're not going to get to enlightenment in this life. You're going to not be able to experience completely cleaning out your garden hose. But if you come to the temple regularly, you're learning in classes, you're meditating daily, you're consulting with a teacher, you're reading books, you're developing actively on the path, you're opening up that faucet wider and wider and wider, and you're getting more and more clean water coming through that garden hose. And now that garden hose is going to spit mud for a while, right? Because we put mud in our garden hose, we need to experience our unwholesome karma. So it's going to spit mud for a while. But as you put more and more clean water into this garden hose, it's going to spit mud, 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 but then you're going to get clean water, right? And then it's going to spit some more mud, right? And then you're going to get clean water, clean water, clean water. Then it's going to get mud, mud, mud. And then you're going to get clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water. You're going to get a little bit of mud, but then eventually it's going to be all clean water because you've been putting so many wise decisions into your life. As long as you're putting unwise decisions into your life, you're still putting mud into your garden hose. And what you would like to do is you'd like to flush this out. The way that you do that is with the Eightfold Path. That teaching that I taught on Tuesday morning, where I taught you guys that core central teaching of the Buddha, and I walked you through each individual factor. That's how you're making wise decisions to be able to produce wholesome Kamma, is through the Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. It's the wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline section. You're going to need to learn that and dial that in closer and closer and make wiser and wiser decisions about how you're interacting in the world and how you're training your mind. That's putting more and more water into the garden hose. And now as you do that, eventually it's going to just have clean water, right? But it's going to take you time to flush this out because you're going to have unwholesome Kamma coming back to you. But now in the present moment, when that unwholesome Kamma is coming back to you, you make wise decisions that is going to produce new wholesome Kamma. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples from my life so that you can see how this works. Okay, so that when I was growing up, I was in a pretty hostile, pretty bitter environment. I remember being at a restaurant one time with a family member, and there was some food that was ordered and the French fries didn't show up. And that person yelled and hollered and screamed at the cashier just because we didn't have our French fries. Instead of just saying, excuse me, ma'am, can you get our French fries? Or I think we ordered French fries. Would it be possible for us to have French fries? It wasn't that. It was yelling and hollering and screaming, right? So my mind was conditioned, maybe like yours too, to think that this is the way that you function in the world, because we grow up with people and we grow up with adults that we look up to and we see the way they function and we think that's the way that we should function. Our mind is conditioned to think that that's the way human beings function because we learn how to be human beings from other human beings. This is what's called conditioning, right? So now when I was growing up, I functioned that way to a certain degree. Not all the time, of course, but, I could be polite, kind, friendly, respectful, but there were times where I'd be bitter and harsh and hostile, maybe like you too, right? So when I met my current wife, who we've been together for 19 years, during the honeymoon phase, when you first meet a new partner, I was on my best behavior. I was doing all the right things and being polite, kind, friendly, respectful. But it's only a matter of time, a few months that things start to unravel a little bit and you start being a little bit bitter here, a little bit hostile here, a little bit frustrated there. And I was doing that for a period of time, right? So I was doing that for about 11 years in our relationship, that there were periods of times where I'd be bitter and harsh and hostile to her, right? Well, at the 11-year mark, I decided, you know what? I'm tired of all of this. I've had this whole long life of broken relationships and difficulties and struggles and all these problems. And I decided to start training my mind with the teachings of the Buddha. And now as I started training my mind with the teachings of the Buddha, I started transforming and my mind started to become calm. I started to be respectful and polite in all situations. But I still had this unwholesome Kamma to deal with because for 11 years, I was bitter and harsh and hostile to my wife, right? So even though I was now being polite and respectful and calm and friendly and all this other stuff, I would sometimes come home and she would just start yelling and hollering at me, right? Because I used to do this stuff in the past, where in the past, when she would yell and holler at me, I would just yell and holler right back. Right. But now understanding these teachings, I realized that was the last thing I was interested in doing, because as long as I put out anger, this anger was just going to keep coming back to me. That's the natural law of Kamma. That's what I'd done in the past and it didn't work. So now I was doing something new. So when I would come home and she would yell and holler at me or be upset or frustrated, I would just walk away. Right. And she could see she's the one who's being angry and frustrated, not me, that she's the one who's angry and frustrated. So I would just walk away. And I did that several times. And then once I had a little bit more control over my mind, sometimes I would come home and she would yell and holler and scream at me. And I would just sit there and listen to her because I knew this was my unwholesome Kamma and I needed to deal with it. So I would just listen to her and I would listen to her. Sometimes I would close my eyes and I would just listen to her. And then after she was done yelling, I would say, "Thank you, dear." And I would why her and I would walk away. And she was surprised because what she was used to was me hollering and yelling back at her, right? And then after I got more control over my mind, I would come home and she would yell and holler at me and I would sit there and I'd listen to her and she'd tell me about how terrible of a husband I was and all the things I did in the past. I'd be like, "Yeah, you're right. I was a bad husband. I did do those things. You're right. I accept complete responsibility for that. I was wrong to do those things. I should have never did those things. But what about now? What am I doing now?" And she had, 6 months or a year of me just walking away from her and being calm and friendly and polite. And she's like, "Now you're not doing that stuff anymore." And I'd say, thank you, dear. And I'd walk away. Right. So after about a year and a half, this got farther and farther and farther and farther and farther between, where initially it was like once a week or twice a week, this stuff was happening, or eventually it was like once a month, once every 3 months, once every 6 months. But after a year and a half, she stopped doing that because I wasn't being bitter and harsh and hostile to her, and I wasn't putting that out. And I had extinguished my unwholesome karma, that she had got it all out. She had gotten all of her anger out. And now, for all these years, however many years it's been, 7.5 years or so, there's no arguments. There's no frustration. There's nothing. We just sit down and have discussions. We still have disagreements where she has one way of doing something and I have a different way of doing something. That's just impermanence. Where in the past, we would fight to death. I'm sure you've been in those situations with a partner where it's like two wild animals fighting to death, trying to prove who's right and who's wrong. Where now we understand impermanence, that of course we have a different thought. Of course we have a different opinion of how we'd like to handle this situation. And now we can just sit down and we can talk about it. And I can listen to her ideas. She can listen to my ideas. And now at the end of the conversation, either she's changed her mind and we're going to do it my way, or I've changed my mind and we're going to do it her way, or neither one of us have changed our mind and she's going to go off and do it her way and I'm going to go off and do it my way. And we're completely comfortable with that. Where in the past we would argue because we were craving that permanence and we were trying to force each other to agree with each other, right? So now we don't do that. We just have calm discussions, right? But then now that I've extinguished that karma, I started noticing my son, who at the time was about 6 years old, he was being bitter and harsh and hostile to his mom. They were having difficulties in their relationship because he had learned that from me. Just like I grew up and my mind was conditioned to think that that's how I'm supposed to treat people, his mind had the same thing. So I needed to extinguish this unwholesome karma too, that my son and my wife were now having difficulties. So now I started teaching my son about the teachings of the Buddha and helping him to learn how to make wise decisions in his relationship with his mom. And now over a period of time, they extinguished their unwholesome karma, their anger and frustration with each other. They extinguished that. So now in our household, it's just completely calm. There's never any arguments. There's never any hostility or bitterness. We all still have disagreements sometimes, but we just come together and talk about them and discuss them, and then we just move on, right? So this is how you extinguish your unwholesome karma, that when your unwholesome karma is coming back to you, practice the Eightfold Path. So the Eightfold Path, the parts that I was practicing is I wasn't speaking with the wrong speech. I was using right speech. You guys, if you go back and study that, you'll see what is there. And I was also practicing the mental discipline section. So you're going to need to do this in all your situations, where sometimes when people get angry and bitter and hostile and harsh with you, if you have anger, if you have ego in your mind, you might say things like, who are you to talk to me like that? I don't deserve that. You need to stop doing that, right? This is the mind trying to tell the other person what they should or shouldn't do, putting expectations on them. Oftentimes, the best thing to do is just walk away, right? When they're being angry and bitter and hostile and harsh, it's the improper time to talk. It's not the proper time to talk. Just walk away. Let them deal with their anger. You're not causing their anger, and there's nothing you can do to stop them from being angry. They have to choose to let go of whatever is in their mind that's causing them to be angry. They have to let it go. And with you standing right there, oftentimes it's very hard for them to do that. So when you walk away, they might actually get more angry when you walk away, but that's because they're craving to be in a conversation with you. But now when you walk away, it helps their mind to be able to let go. So you're going to need to extinguish your unwholesome karma when it's coming back to you. And you're gradually bringing down your craving, anger, and ignorance, and you're gradually increasing your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. You can't snap your fingers today and instantly practice these teachings perfectly. So you're still putting mud in your garden hose, right? You still have craving, anger, and ignorance. So you're still putting mud in your garden hose. But if you continue to practice the Eightfold Path more and more and more, and you bring that up in your life, dialing it in closer and closer, and then you live your life that way for an extended period of time, practicing the Eightfold Path, eventually you'll extinguish all your unwholesome karma. And now you'll only experience wholesome karma coming back to you. When I say you'll only experience wholesome karma coming back to you, sometimes what people hear, which is what I'm not saying, is everything's going your way. That's not true. right? When you're enlightened, you're still going to be experiencing things that are opposite of what you would prefer to occur, right? It's still possible for people to be bitter and harsh and hostile to you, even when you're enlightened, right? It's not like people are going to roll out the red carpet for you. The other people aren't even going to know that your mind's enlightened, right? So you're still going to be experiencing the occasional person that's bitter and harsh and hostile, but your mind will be unaffected by it. That's what I mean by you won't be experiencing unwholesome kamma, because you will have eliminated your craving, anger, and ignorance. And now when someone's being bitter, harsh, and hostile, your mind will be unaffected by that, right? It'll be very rare that that occurs when you are enlightened, but your mind will be unaffected by it. So when I say that you'll only be experiencing wholesome kamma, it doesn't mean everything's going your way and people are doing things your way. It just means that your mind is unaffected by all this impermanence that's happening around you. Because even as an enlightened being, you're still going to experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. No matter how enlightened you are, you can't eliminate those things. Sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. This is just impermanence, that this body cannot be permanently healthy. This body cannot be permanently youthful. This body is not going to experience permanent life. This body, this being is not going to experience to have material possessions permanently. You're going to lose your material possessions sometimes. This is normal, right? But when your mind's craving permanence and you want these things to be permanent, you will struggle when those things are changing. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind doesn't have that craving anymore. And that's why you don't have the anger, because you've arisen this wisdom and your mind's been fully transformed. So you will be experiencing exclusively wholesome kamma, but there's going to be occasional things that you would rather not occur. But when it does occur, your mind's not affected by it. Your mind's not upset or frustrated. Okay, so do you guys have any questions on extinguishing your unwholesome kamma? No questions here? Okay, so remember, you're bringing your practice up to the Eightfold Path, realizing you're still putting some mud in your garden hose. You're bringing your practice up to the Eightfold Path, and then you need to live your life that way for an extended period of time, making wise decisions through that Eightfold Path. Okay, well, when I explain these kinds of things about the natural law of Kamma to people, sometimes people think about laws of society and they say, hold on a second, David, you said you can't run and hide from your kamma. But what about that person who their bloody footprint was at the murder scene and they had the bloody murder weapon under their bed and their car was full of blood, and they went to court and they were found not guilty? Didn't they run and hide from their kamma? And the answer is no, they haven't run and hid from their kamma. What you're looking at is the laws of society. The laws of society are imperfect because they're created by human beings. They can't be created, administered, and enforced equally amongst all of us. We should always aspire for that to occur more and more. But the fact is that because human beings are involved, that we're prone to error. So we create laws, we administer laws, and we enforce laws oftentimes in a way that isn't 100% fair because of the universal truth of impermanence. We don't have the full information. So that person could go to court and they're found not guilty, but they haven't run and hid from their kamma because the laws of society are just one aspect of their kamma. There's other parts of their kamma that you may not be there to see. So sometimes people get all worked up when they see someone's found not guilty. So I'm going to share some things with you to help you see that that person whose bloody footprint was at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapon was under their bed, there was blood all over their house and car, they still experienced their kamma. You just might not have been there to see it because you're only looking at the laws of society, that they didn't go to jail. That's just one aspect of it. So for this person, they're going to have a bad reputation, right? In the community, the news is out that this person has been accused of murder. They've gone to court. All the evidence is all over the news. They're having a bad reputation in the community now. They can experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, as well as a shortened lifespan. The way that this actually works is that if you have enough craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind to kill another human being, that means your mind has all kinds of discontentedness. And when your mind is having that stress and anxiety and all that hostility in your mind, it's putting strain on the physical body. And now your heart, your lungs, your liver, all these different organs are not going to function so well. And you'll see that this person has a shortened lifespan or sickness, aging, and death more so than an average person, because they have so much discontentedness in their mind that it's causing difficulties with their physical body. Also, if they have enough craving, anger, and ignorance in order to kill another human being, it's not like all the rest of their relationships are going wonderful, right? They're having difficulties in other relationships too. So they're going to have hostility, aggression, and even fights in their other relationships, and they can even be killed themselves by somebody else. They can experience a loss of income and wealth, because in order to go to court and defend yourself on a murder charge, this is very expensive. So they're going to have a certain loss of income and wealth, and they're probably not going to be working during that time while they're defending themselves in court to be able to get off of this murder charge. Then they're going to also have these difficulties in their other relationships. Like I shared, if they have enough anger and hostility to kill another human being, it's not like all their other relationships are going wonderful. They're having difficulties in those relationships too. They're also going to have challenges securing and progressing in employment and securing a housing. If you were an employer and this person that was all over the news applied for a job at your company, and you know that this person was accused of murder and they were found not guilty, are you going to hire them in your company? Or say that you have a house and you're looking for a roommate, and you have an ad out to have a roommate, and they came and applied to stay in your house. Are you going to have them come and stay in your house knowing that they've been accused of murder? Probably not, right? So they're going to have difficulty securing employment and housing, as well as acquiring basic necessities to sustain their life. And then, of course, they're going to have discontentedness, like stress and guilt and shame and fear and things like this in their mind. And rebirth itself, these are all results of their decisions. So they haven't run and hid from their Kamma. It's just that the natural laws are different than the laws of society. The laws of society are imperfect. So you'll see people that go to court who are actually guilty and they're found not guilty, right? This is an unfortunate part, but this is just because human beings are prone to error. And you can also see the other side of this too. You can see people who go to court who are actually not guilty, and they're actually found guilty of the charges that they're up for, right? So I'll give you an example of that too. Let's just say that I was in a gang. Maybe I joined this gang when I was 18 years old, and all the way up to the age of 25, I was out there selling drugs. I was murdering. I was, robbing people. I was doing all kinds of unwise things, but I never got caught for any of that stuff. And then maybe by the age of 25, I decided I'm going to get out of this gang. And now I'm 26, 27 years old. I've been away from the gang for like a year or two. But now let's just say the gang went out and did a murder, and somehow it got pinned on me. And now I go to court and I'm found guilty of this murder. Well, this is my Kamma, right? Because during that period of time where I was doing all those unwise things, I never got caught for any of that stuff. But now my association with that gang, now it got pinned on me, and now I went to court. And even though I was not guilty, I wasn't even there, I was away from the gang for a year or two, I'm actually going to jail for this particular murder because I never got caught for any of the others. So when you see these big cases in the news where people look like they're guilty, but they're found not guilty, or they look like they're not guilty and they're found guilty, you don't have to be upset. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be frustrated. Whatever is occurring is the Kamma. It's the natural law of Kamma. Those people can't run and hide from what it is that they're experiencing. They are going to experience the results of their decisions. The natural law is going to work perfectly, and everybody's going to experience the results of their decisions. They can't run and hide from that. But the human laws, the laws of society, they are imperfect. People are going to sometimes be found either guilty or not guilty when they aren't actually guilty or not guilty. Okay? So yes, question?
Yeah, so in your example, the person who was not guilty but found guilty had all these terrible things they'd done. But what if there was a false accusation that was then they maybe a rape charge or something, and it was a false rape charge, but they still got found guilty or whatever. They've done nothing wrong.
Yeah, you have to look, and you're not going to know this for other people, but you have to look at everything in the totality of their life, of what they've been doing and what they've been experiencing. This is why when you're looking from the outside in, you can't see somebody else's Kamma 100% because you don't know every single decision that they've made and what it's led to. But you can get to a point where you can see your Kamma. So if someone goes to court and they weren't guilty of that rape and they were found guilty, there were some decisions in their past that led to that. And you might not know what those decisions are that led to that particular result. But it's their Kamma, whatever they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. Other questions? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a break here for you guys. It's 10:20. Is it 10:20? Yeah, 10:20. So let's take a 20-minute break, give you guys a chance to rest and get some snacks, spend some time with each other, use the restroom. At 10:40, I'm going to talk about this next topic of what is merit, and then we're going to talk about continued support on the path to enlightenment as well. So enjoy your break, and I'll see you guys at 10:40. Okay?